The proven builder versus the proven winner. The process-driven CEO versus we don't got next, we got now. Nebraska's still looking for their killer instinct, but Colorado knew they'd beat TCU before they knew who their starting center was. This might be the hardest ticket to get in Folsom Field history, and the media attention around this game would make you think it's Alabama or Georgia playing for a spot in the national championship. The hate between these two programs runs deep, and with new head coaches whose entire season will be judged by the outcome of this game, the pressure to win is at an all-time high. We've only seen them play once so far, but that's enough to get an idea of what they bring to the table. So today, we'll talk about what a win in this game means for both schools, and I'll give you my game preview and final score prediction. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my live reaction right after the game. And if you're pumped to see this old school rivalry coming back on Saturday, hit the like button and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson winds up, goes deep, got a man, touchdown!
Today, the AP poll came out, and Colorado was ranked 22nd in the country, which makes them a ranked team for the first time since they were number 21 3 years ago. And this game was already going to be a spectacle, but now the attention's even bigger because a win for Deion this week would mean they'd break into the top 20 going into a much easier game against Colorado State. And that would set them up for a top 15 showdown with Oregon right after that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. They got to lock in this week because even though it's at home and Nebraska looked like its same old self, this one is not free. I also saw that ESPN put out their Heisman rankings after the first slate of games, and they had Shedeur at number 1, Travis at 2, and freshman running back Dylan Edwards at number 9, which isn't much of a surprise since they all had amazing stat lines, but you can still bet any of them and get plus 6,000 or better odds, so we're not talking about legitimate Heisman threats just yet. Now let's talk about what this game means for both these schools and the coaches. They've been playing this one for over 100 years, and even though Nebraska leads the series with more than twice as many wins, they couldn't finish in either of the last two, and that's what a lot of fans remember. Oddly enough, those 18 and 19 matchups featured Frost and Mel Tucker in their first years, but none of those teams made bowl games, so they weren't nationally relevant at the time. You fast forward to now, and you've got two extremely high-profile head coaches in year one, and both fan bases have such high expectations that a loss this weekend would be soul-crushing. Deion and his players are so vocal that they have to back up all this confidence, especially at home against an inferior opponent. Nebraska fans know they're in for a rebuild, and they're okay with that, but losing another game by one score in embarrassing fashion would mean that half of them tap out until they see some sort of proof against Illinois or Purdue in October. A loss here would mean Colorado falls out of the top 25, all of the Heisman talk would calm down, and the hype nationally would cool off until they had a strong showing against Oregon, SC, or UCLA. For Nebraska, the consequences are worse. Fans already got an idea of what a road win under Rule would look like, and it was stripped away in the final moments. An 0-2 start means that bowl eligibility is in jeopardy, and Nebraska would only be favored to win 4 of their last 10 games. For my channel to keep growing, I need Nebraska fans to be invested every week, but the reality is, a loss here would kill a lot of excitement. Trust me, this game's important for all of us, and Deion Sanders and Matt Rule wouldn't want it any other way. I've been seeing a bunch of clips on TikTok, and one of them was talking about Shedeur playing with a chip on his shoulder against TCU because Kendall Briles didn't show him much respect at a camp a few years back. And that really got me thinking, does Deion feel that same way towards Nebraska? There were rumors that Deion had been contacted about the job back in October, and even if it was just a feeler phone call to his agent, does he feel slighted for not getting an interview? What I've learned about college football is that motivation plays a huge factor, and with the right motivation, players and coaches will ramp up to another level. We saw it last week. TCU was a massive favorite, for good reason. The whole world was making jokes about this team of portal players, and bam, they play the perfect game. But this week's different. The whole world loves and believes in Colorado now. They went from massive underdog to outright favorite. Nebraska who? The team with a coach who couldn't beat Minnesota even when he had the ball and the lead with 2 minutes left. The team with a quarterback who threw 3 picks and could only get the ball in the end zone with a trick play. The whole world wants Colorado to win and says they're going to. And now, Matt Rule and his team can't even go on their phones without being force fed some extra motivation. People ask all the time how they can support the channel, and the easiest ways are to subscribe and share my videos with more Nebraska fans. But if you want another option, I put the merch site back up. So if you want to get stickers, wristbands, a shirt, a hoodie, the link's in the description box below, or you can go to corncraze.com and you'll find it all there. The last 2 times we got this game, Colorado won on a 40-yard touchdown in the final minute, and again by 3 after starting the fourth quarter, down 24 points. Both those games were sold out, but Nebraska fans filled up half the stadium when they went on the road. And this time I know Colorado will have a better turnout, but I bet we see almost 20% wearing red. It's a morning kick, and the only other decent game on at the same time is Utah-Baylor. So I won't be surprised if this ends up being one of the top 5 most watched games of the entire season, which means both these coaches have even more reason to show up in a big way since every recruit in America is going to be watching them play. Let's start with Colorado's offense versus the Nebraska D. In the offseason, I think the assumption was that Shedeur would be a really good quarterback, but the question was, how deep could they go at receiver and running back? And was the O-line strong enough to give him time to get the ball out? Well, we learned pretty quick that the O-line matched up well with an odd front, and when there was pressure, the QB was throwing it before anybody got in his face. They targeted 4 different receivers and 1 tight end the entire game, and the top 3 all had at least 6 catches for 117 yards. At running back, they rotated 3 guys who all had at least 6 carries, but they only averaged 3.3 yards a run. The point I think we need to emphasize here is that the depth on offense wasn't an issue, and I bet if one guy got injured, there's somebody else in those rooms who can step up. I was watching this video by the QB school where JT breaks down Shedeur's reads and the play calling from that TCU game, and the 2 biggest takeaways I had were that the play calling was as good as it gets and that TCU was crushed over and over with mesh concepts that caught the corners up with crossing routes and left guys wide open for big gains. TCU didn't tackle that well in space. They got picked apart in the secondary, and even if they got to the quarterback, he always had an outlet with a running back or somebody running shallow. Nebraska's defense won't have those same issues. To prevent the mesh route confusion, they're going to run more zone just like they did last week. Their tackling is much better than TCU, and the physicality at linebacker and safety is going to wear on Colorado's starters as they get into the fourth quarter. I've seen Nebraska get beat down late in games for years because of poor conditioning, but against Minnesota, we finally saw somebody else fall victim to the physicality. Colorado's well conditioned, and they went strong all day when it was 97 degrees out, but TCU wasn't beating them down all game, and Nebraska's heavy hits in the second and third level are going to take a toll. My biggest concern is what replacing Ty Robinson in the first half looks like. He's out for targeting, and he's arguably the best D lineman they've got. So can they get pressure on Shedeur, or is Tony White going to have to bring more pressure with Reimer and Bullock? On the other side, Colorado's defense was good against the pass and held Morris to only 279 on 42 attempts, but they gave up over 7 yards a carry and let TCU run for 262 yards and 4 touchdowns. Hunter and Woods both had an interception, and there were a couple others that were dropped, but honestly, I'm not too worried about their secondary. Nebraska learned a valuable lesson about turnovers last week, and even with the 3 interceptions, they still had a chance to win that game. This week, Rule's message and scheme is all about protecting the ball and not allowing guys like Travis Hunter to go one-on-one with the receiver to contest a catch, because the odds are he would win. Jeff Sims was great as a runner, and with so many weapons to use out of the backfield, I won't be surprised to see Nebraska throw it less than 20 times all game if they don't get behind early. And if they do have to throw it, they're looking for Ramir Johnson out of the backfield or anything underneath or relatively short to make sure Sims doesn't make any game-defining mistakes. I'm still really concerned about the left side of the O-line, and DC Charles Kelly is going to know how to attack Corcoran hard, so I bet we see more fullback or 21 personnel to give him support. And I'm not going to be surprised if we see Grant sit the entire game this week. So Emmett Johnson could get some chances since the game plan is going to be to run it straight down their throat and burn as much clock as they can to keep the offense off the field. It's about controlling the tempo, owning the time of possession, and allowing Sims to make big plays with his legs since we know that's what his strength is. We've got to talk about the betting line for this game because it flew up after Saturday. But before we do, I want to make sure that if you do want to bet on this game or any other this week, that you have the opportunity to. Our sponsor for today's video is BroThrow, which is the best platform I've ever used to bet on games because it's available in all 50 states. It doesn't require a deposit. There are no minimums or withdrawal requirements. And most importantly, you don't pay a 10% VIG since it's not a sports book. We had over 100 Corn Craze subscribers take Nebraska plus 7.5 last Thursday, and they all won with plus 100 odds. So if you're betting on spreads, totals, or money lines somewhere else, you can join us for free at brothrow.com/GBR and start saving on the juice today. The line for this game started at Nebraska minus 1.5 after the game on Saturday, and by the next day, the hype from the win drew so much action, it shifted to Colorado minus 3.5. It's Tuesday, and there's already more money on Colorado to cover the spread than all of this week's NFL games combined. This is the most extreme example of the public driving the lineup that I've ever seen, and it's all because Nebraska looked like the same team we've seen for years who can't get out of their own way, and Colorado just beat a big-name team on the road and proved they have two legit Heisman contenders. Here's the problem. 90% of the bets are on one side, and when the public likes a pick that much, they're usually wrong. In statistics, regression towards the mean is when one variable in a sample is extreme, but the next variable is likely to be closer to the mean, or the average. Both of the results in this week's games were extreme. Nebraska had 4 turnovers, and they lost by 3 when they had the ball and the lead with 2 minutes left. Colorado threw for 500 yards, and multiple players had career days. The odds are Nebraska plays better and Colorado comes back down to reality, but that's not a guarantee. Maybe Colorado's that good and they finish as a top 15 team this season. And maybe Rule's in major rebuild mode and Jeff Sims is a turnover machine that just won't get any better. It's up to you to decide, but there's no way I could ever put my money up there with 90% of the public. Last week's debacle in Minneapolis was so incredibly painful to watch, not because I expected Nebraska to win their first game, but because they lost when they should have won. I'm not doubting Matt Rule or this staff, but there were some personnel decisions and some play calls that even they would agree were probably wrong. But this week's different. It's week 2. There's film to build off of, and the weaknesses shine bright for all to see and for the staff to correct. Nebraska's issue wasn't that they weren't tackling well enough, that they couldn't cover NFL receivers, or that they were just worn down by the fourth quarter. Their issue was turnovers, and that's something you can correct with a different game plan and changing the ball carrier's technique in crucial moments. On the flip side, Deion's team walks with a different confidence. They believe they're champions, they play like champions, and in their one game together, they finish that way. The Sean Lewis offense versus the Tony White defense should be an amazing matchup, but how will Satterfield do against Kelly's D? It's all about the ground game and getting points on the board, which is something the offense struggled to do last week. I've been so back and forth with this prediction, but until I see Matt Rule rally his guys and get the job done, I can't pick them to win, even though on Saturday they're going to be the deeper and more physical group on the field. I'm taking Colorado to win 31-30 in heartbreaking fashion because they've got the more proven quarterback and they're more likely to win the turnover battle. But it's still Colorado, go Big Red, and please do us a solid one time and just win. And yes, I'm taking Nebraska plus 3. This prediction's tough for me because I know Nebraska has the ability to run it for 250 yards and win this game, but I need to see it to believe it. It feels like they've been in position to win 50 times, but they always find a way to lose. It's time to prove me wrong. Prove America wrong, because not only do they not want you to win, but they don't believe you can either. Prove to yourself you can finish and win the games you're supposed to, and break this negative cycle that we just haven't been able to get away from. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Is this Nebraska's biggest game of the year, or do you still think Iowa's more important? Does Colorado play as well with the new expectations, or were they in a better position as an underdog? Will Rule be able to help Sims limit his turnovers, or is the safe play to just run the ball 90% of the time? I'm sure the game plan is going to be to run it as much as possible, but you can't just run it if you're playing from behind, so I just hope they can match the scoring. But that's all I've got for today, so until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.